Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Past lives are something most of us have heard of. Many find this topic fascinating. Others even try past life regression therapy. However, if we do have more than one life, what occurs in the interval in between? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone TV channel, xztv.ca. With us this hour to explore what may go on between lives is Reena Kumarasingham. Reena is a regression therapist, between lives therapist, and trainer supervisor for the Past Life Regression Academy. She's the author of Shrouded Truth, Magdalene Lineage, and Divine Consciousness. Over the last 8 years, she's spearheaded the Pioneering the New Consciousness retreats. Her website, ReenaKumarasingham.com. Reena, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thank you so much for having me, Gwilda. I'm so excited to be here.
I am. I love your topic, and it's just a fascinating one. I don't know if we'll find any answers today, but we'll give her a try.
We'll give it a shot.
Give it a shot. So how did you first become interested in past lives?
Well, I actually grew up a Hindu in Malaysia. So as a Hindu, past lives for me was a way of life, was just a fact of life. You know, grass is green, sky is blue, past lives exist. And so growing up with it particularly being a way of life, I was really fascinated by it. And when I used to go to my Hindu study classes, you know, as a kid, as a child, it's very similar to catechism for Christians. So, you know, we had our Hindu child study classes. We were always told that our lives right now, our current life is like a snapshot, but the lives of our soul is like a movie. And so that's basically how everything interlinks. And I found that really, really interesting. And then what I did was, when I went to university, I did my degree in psychology. And when I graduated at the age of 21, I realized I didn't have enough experience to be able to serve in this capacity. I didn't have enough knowledge, enough wisdom. And then what I did was I did a master's in business administration, and I entered the corporate world in Asia in the media industry for about 12 years. And then I got really bored with doing public relations in the media industry. And when I spoke to my public relations mentor, he said, Reena, if you're bored doing public relations in the media industry, you're better off just getting out of public relations altogether. And he was right, because the media industry is really fast-paced. Everything else is not as fast-paced as the media industry. And so then I decided to sort of wet my toes again to see if I wanted to go back into the psychological counseling arena. And I did a quick weekend course in NLP. I realized I loved it. Like, I really wanted to go back into it. And then there was a gentleman who was advertising a past life regression training course in Singapore called Andy Tomlinson. And so I was really enthralled by it because he combined modern psychotherapeutic techniques with past life regression. So for me, that was the perfect marriage, no pun intended. And so I did the course, and then Andy took my money and then married me. And then so we have, you know, he still owes me, I tell him this. And then and then he basically, because I used to live in Singapore in the tropical weather, he just brought me to the UK weather, you know, place. And this is where I've been ever since.
Pretty fascinating. So I understand you had a near-death experience.
I did.
Would you go into that for us a little bit?
Of course. It was in 2020, in March, at the end of March. And I remember this date so clearly because it was my father's birthday, the 27th of March, and I had a release coming out as well, but I was in bed. And I thought I had a burnout. But as a few days progressed, I think 5 days progressed, I realized that I actually had COVID. And this was at the early stages of COVID, where not very many people knew what was happening. People were going into hospitals. The only thing you heard in the news and the media were, you get COVID, COVID equals to death, really. And I knew I had COVID because I felt two metal bands around my lung, the top part of my lung and the bottom part of my lung, just squeezing me. And I found it very, very difficult to breathe. And I was extremely fatigued. I couldn't get out of bed. And so, I mean, it was good because this is how Andy, who is my husband, took really amazing care of me, because for 60 days, actually, I couldn't get out of bed. And so there was a time when and during the early days, when I said to Andy, I said, I really don't want to go to the hospital, because what you heard were people went into the hospital, they were intubated, they were isolated, there were no windows, fluorescent lights. It wasn't something I wanted to experience. And I said, whatever happens, is it okay if I just stayed at home? And he was very kind and very sweet. And he said yes. And so he took on the burden of actually taking care of me. And I remember this so clearly, because there were a few times I couldn't breathe between the 27th of March and the 10th of April. And every time I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe, I actually had a panic attack. And on the 10th of April, it was at night, and Andy actually, it was about 10 o'clock, and Andy came to wish me good night, took our little doggies, went to his room. And I reached over and I turned off the light. And as my eyes closed, I had a very strong knowing that if my eyes closed now, I wouldn't open them ever again. And with this knowing came an incredible sense of peace. It was as though another part of my body took over, almost like my soul took over. But there was one part of what I would refer to as the ego consciousness that sort of went, I have to observe this. And the minute I closed my eyes, I saw 5 light beings at the foot of my bed. And they do you know a Bunsen burner? You know how the flames of the Bunsen burner, that color? Yeah, so they were basically like the color of the flames of the Bunsen burner. And they talked to me about my current life. And we were reviewing my childhood, which is where most of my wounding occurred. And they did a lot of healing with that. And then they said, okay, well, it's time to go. And I was like, okay, this is really happening. And I felt like I was pulled into a different space, an expansive space. But I felt like I was pulled, like I was caught in an ocean riptide. I had zero control over anything. I couldn't control anything. And as I was being pulled, all my concerns fell away. Everything that I thought was really important, like numbers, work matters, bills, things that I thought was so important in my living world, all these things just fell away. And I just felt so free and so expansive. And I just thought to myself, wow, this is the most beautiful, peaceful experience. But as I was going as well, there was the observer part that just went, this monumental thing is happening to you and nobody knows, not even Andy knew. And then then the beings of light basically showed me the earth and showed like what looked like a grid of plumes of gray smoke around the earth. And the beings of light asked me, why do you strangle yourselves? Why do you suffocate yourselves with these plumes of smoke? And at that point, I thought, well, maybe this had some reference to COVID, because everyone was, COVID meant you couldn't breathe. And then it was time. They said, okay, well, it's time for us to go now. But the one thing that was holding me back was Andy, because he was taking such wonderful care of me. I couldn't bear for him to come down in the morning and see my lifeless body there and, perhaps feel guilt or the should haves, would haves. I couldn't bear that. And so I actually negotiated with the beings of light. And I said, is it okay if I have 10 minutes? I just want to pop back, write a note to Andy, saying, I love you. It is my time to go. This is not your fault, and all that. And they basically said, no, you either come with us or you go back. And, it was a really hard choice to make, because going into that expansive place of so much freedom and so much peace, it's something I've never experienced before. It was so tempting. But again, that part of me that wanted for Andy to be okay with all this, sort of won. And then then I blacked out, actually. So I don't know what happened then, but when I opened my eyes, I turned the light on and it was about 2 a.m. And then I just basically stayed in bed, and I was just processing the whole thing.
It certainly is life-changing. It's funny we have to die to have something be life-changing, but
Exactly.
It is life-changing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It puts everything into perspective.
Yes.
So when we're talking about past lives, how can you be sure that past lives aren't just metaphorical? Because a lot of the things that we experience, just even in your past life, in your near-death experience, are metaphors to make sense to the mind of what's going on at the quantum level or in the spiritual realm. How can you be sure that past lives aren't just metaphorical?
Well, I think if we have to go into the the neurophysiology of the brain. If something is metaphorical, or if we're making something up, there is a different part of the brain that lights up, which is the prefrontal, the frontal cortex. If we are actually remembering something, it comes more from our hippocampus, and that's where emotions come through, very, very strong emotions. So as a past life regression therapist, when we are working with past lives, what actually happens is, if there is a spontaneous catharsis, and that's what we do as past life therapists, we do healing work, is to allow these emotions to come up so that we can move forward in our life in a reframed mindset. It's sort of taking away all these challenges in a reframed mindset. And if there's a really strong emotional release, then we know that more likely than not, that it is a real memory. They're accessing a real memory. And so an example I can give you with this is, have you got a pet? I have to ask you this question.
Well, I do, but we're just about ready to go
Oh,
into
okay.
a station break. So
Okay.
we're gonna have to pick up on pets on the other side.
Okay.
Reena and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. If I had a past life, why can't I remember it? With us this hour discussing past lives is Reena Kumarasingham, the author of Shrouded Truth, Magdalene Lineage, and Divine Consciousness. Her website, reenakumarasingham.com. Reena, we were talking about past life, how you can tell if you're actually looking at a past life versus um, a metaphor, and you said emotion is the key. Is that because of the part of the brain that emotion comes from?
Yes, because it's very close. The amygdala, where the emotion is very, very close within the hippocampus, very, very close to where our memories are processed and kept. So that's how we know. That's a huge indicator that it is a real memory versus something that is made up. So, I was talking about pets. So, you did tell me you had a pet. If you were talking to a friend, for example, and that friend mentions to you that their pet had passed away. If you had your own pet that's passed away, you would immediately tap into that memory of your own pet passing away, and you would feel really deeply and empathize with your friend. And that's because it's tapped into the emotion and therefore the memory. But if you say didn't have a pet and your friend was telling you your pet, her pet had passed away, then you wouldn't feel quite as deeply. You would sympathize with her and say, look, I'm really sorry. What can I do to help you or whatever? Let's go have coffee. But you couldn't feel it. You couldn't feel what your friend is feeling, and that's how we know.
So there's another little issue here. There's past life memory, and there's genetic memory. How can you tell one of those from the other?
The way we tell is how we actually regress through the timelines. So, for example, if we can track your past life through a horizontal axis, right, which is the journey of your soul, the movie of your soul, and then you've got your ancestral axis that goes down this way, and you are right where the two lines meet. Yes, and the way we actually manage the process is, with past lives, we just say just go to a memory where that reminds you of this. But when we're actually tapping into the ancestral line, it's a different way of navigating the past life. We have to go through the different memories of the different ancestors to get to the source ancestor.
So it's pretty clear that you're going through memories of ancestors versus memories of a person's past life?
Yeah, as opposed to the linear memory of a person's past life.
So why do we forget our past lives?
Well, if we look at the between life states here, we forget our past lives because we actually come into life to learn lessons. And if we already know a lot of our past lives, it is very, very difficult to learn those lessons. It's almost like knowing the answers to your test before actually taking the test.
So I have a question. A lot of people mention that we're here to learn lessons, but how do we know we're here to learn lessons? Whose idea was that?
Oh, in between lives sessions, the idea actually comes from us, the souls. We choose to come here.
Okay, so you figured that out by going into between life regression?
Yes, we do.
So do we get to read the small print, or it seems?
Well, it's really interesting because in between life sessions, the between life sessions will actually be blocked, and we've actually experienced this if the person hasn't gone through their test yet, or if they're in the middle of a big karmic drama, as it were, a big karmic lesson. So, for example, if someone is in the middle of going through a divorce, they can't experience a between lives because, for example, say that divorce is part of their lesson. But after the divorce, then they can come for a between lives, and then they can actually get higher perspective, spiritual perspective as to why that divorce happens. And that would then minimize the emotional negative impact on that person moving forward.
So it would seem we have plenty of healing needed from this lifetime. What's the advantage of going into past life? I mean, is it just kind of spiritual avoidance?
I wouldn't say so much it's avoidance. I think it's almost like peeling an onion. So when we actually do past life regression therapy, we're actually doing trauma work. And when we go back to past lives, that is the source of a particular trauma we are going through at the moment. It's almost like there's a disassociative state. Like like it's in the past. Do you know what I mean? The person goes through it. The psyche goes through it because they know it's safe. It's happened in the past, and the psyche knows that the person is sitting on the couch right now and they're fine. Does that make sense to you? So people go through the past life to sort of peel the layers of the onion to get to the point in the current life of what they're going through. And then it's so much easier and safer for the client to go through that particular challenge.
So if a client is going through some, I'm trying to figure out how you target this. So if a client is comes to you for past life regression, do
Mm.
you follow in through what's up in their lives right now, or do you just kind of go back and see whatever shows up?
No, I mean, so there are two ways we can do past life regression. I mean, the first way is what I call past life tourism. And this is where someone just wants to come and explore different past lives. And there's, you just explore. It's like, getting on a plane and having a high level overview of different past lives. But when we work with regression therapy, we actually are doing sort of trauma healing. And this is where we actually go back to the source of the trauma that the person is facing right now. The other thing as well is, when we forget and we come back, when we incarnate and we forget what our lesson is, sometimes those traumas are not resolved in the past life. So what happens is they bring back the lesson in the current life. And so what we do is we take them back to the past life where it's safer for the psyche to be able to confront the trauma and resolve it, and then bring it forward to the current life, confront the present trauma, heal it, and get spiritual perspective, like a wider spiritual perspective, the video perspective of why this has happened to them. So it's basically like a full picture of the soul.
So we're running along in our day-to-day life, and various times something will happen. It'll trigger us into this life, but past experience, past trauma. Does the
Mhm.
same thing happen with past life? You're running along in this ordinary reality life, and all of a sudden you're triggered, but there's nothing it hooks to in this lifetime?
Yeah, there are some. If you actually look at some of Dr. Ian Stevenson's work, he is a renowned psychologist. I think he's from the US, and he's quite famous for looking at children's past lives, spontaneous past lives that have popped up. And he's actually gone and he's done the research, and he's found out that the details that the child remembers actually does all tie in when he's, gone, and sort of looked at to see if everything correlates.
Like
So
historical facts, is that what you're talking about?
historical facts, yeah.
Okay.
So, for example, there was a child in Thailand who was born with a birthmark, around the face, and this child spontaneously started to talk about how he was shot in the face. And when Professor Ian Stevenson, when he heard this, he actually went to Thailand, interviewed the child, interviewed the family, and then he got the details from the child, and then went and investigated all these different details. And he realized that, yes, there was actually this person by this name who was shot by, so and so. And that's how that soul died, and then came back with a memory, of a birthmark.
I've heard of children having more access to past lives than we have as
Mm.
adults. Um, why does that fade?
Because when we actually tap, therapeutically, when we tap into past lives, it's easier to tap into past lives under hypnosis. So your brainwave is on the alpha brainwave. I think it's the alpha. But when, when children are really young, they have that similar brainwave until they grow up. And the more they grow up, our brainwaves actually change. So, and also when children are born, children are very pure. They're not conditioned by different things. So that's why the memories are sitting right on the surface. And the fact of the matter is, there are so many children who will spontaneously talk about memories, But a lot of parents sort of push it aside. Maybe they might attribute it to imagination, for example, or she's got an invisible friend, or something. But it could very well be past life memories that come up.
I think children are sharper than we give them credit for.
Much sharper. Yeah.
So how can a person tell if, really they need past life regression? How can you tell you need past life regression versus therapy for the present life?
I think the thing is, if you need a wider spiritual perspective for a challenge you're going through, and if you can relate to the fact that our lives are a movie and not just a snapshot of our current life, then that's when you would look for someone who would do regression therapy.
So is it like the emotions and the trauma that you're experiencing in the present don't really add up to the trauma that you've had in this lifetime?
So can you say that again?
hmm Is it like the emotions and the trauma that you're experiencing in the present don't add up to the trauma that you've experienced this particular lifetime?
Yeah, no, that could be, that could be a factor as well. But I think the reason why people want to come for past life regression therapy is for that wider spiritual perspective.
I've heard of a lot of people saying, "Oh, I was um, you know, Java the Hutt or whatever in the past lifetime," right? Usually it's something glamorous. And yet
Right.
I've heard enough people, "Oh, ISIS, I was ISIS in a past lifetime."
Mhm.
How many ISISes were there? What's going on there? I've heard a lot of
So,
people say the same character.
yeah. So, I mean, this is a really good question, because in my practice and in a lot of regression therapists' practice, we see about, thousands of clients, and we probably get one glamorous lifestyle. The reason why this is talked about is because there are records out there that they can correlate with their accounts. But a lot of people, when they come to us, they're peasants. So, for example, ditch diggers, for example. And in those days, ditch diggers didn't have maybe even birth records. So they can't go back and they cannot correlate the stories, their accounts, the ditch diggers or the peasants. They can't correlate it. Or they were a soldier somewhere. And if they can't recall their name, because when they come for healing, we don't ask for facts like names.
Well, I'm sorry, we're going to
No,
have
sorry.
to take another station break. Rena and
Okay.
I will be right back to continue our discussion. So please stay right there. This is
Okay.
Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. If we have more than one life, what do we do between them? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing between lives is Reena Kumarasingham. Her website, reenakumarasingham.com. Reena, what is between life therapy?
So between lives is basically, if you look at that line again, that, the past life, and then this is your ancestral line. Between lives is what happens between your last past life and your current life. And in this between life space is what happens here normally is where we find out why we have planned to come to be reincarnated in the current life. What was the plan? What were the soul contracts? Why did we choose the mother that we chose, the husband that we chose, the father that we chose? And also we get a brief review of the immediate past life, so that we can see the link between that past life and the current life and how the whole story ties together.
So, what is between life spiritual regression?
Between life spiritual regression is a process that is based on Dr. Michael Newton's work. He called it life between lives regression. In our academy, we call it between life spiritual regression. And it's a process that therapists can use to take people into this between life space.
So when we're getting ready to come back, okay, from the between life place, and we've kind of made this plan, are we drawn to a specific genetic line in order to find a resonance with what we've come to do?
It could be. It differs for different people. Some people find that genetic line, but in most cases, there is something that we refer to as a soul group. And so it's not so much a physiological genetic line, but a soul family, as it were. And within this soul family, they can pick and choose who they're going to have different soul contracts for to basically go through the lesson that they choose to go through.
Okay, so you gave this example of this is our life, past life, future life, whatever, and this is our genetic memory and genetic line, and where the two cross is where the person is, where they incarnate. So with that being the case, don't we have to be, when a line carries so much memory and so much resonance with different things, isn't it important that we choose a line that resonates with our mission this time?
Of course, it is. But people don't in our experience within the practice, people don't purposely choose a particular genetic line. It's almost like some people choose a body, like a physical body. They choose where they're born. They can choose different souls to come down as a soul, in terms of contracts, but there's never a discussion about the genealogy and the ancestral flow or the ancestral curse that comes through. However, I would say that if a particular genetic line is significant, so if you're a generational, trauma breaker, or, which is very much in line with your life lesson, then that would factor into your plan, but it's never explicitly discussed during a session.
Interesting. So we were talking about a generational trauma breaker. So in that case, the person comes into whatever family line is carrying the trauma that they would like to break this time.
Yes, but it also could be that the soul family that they've made these contracts with have also incarnated within this line. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, it is about the lesson that the soul is learning by being a trauma breaker, a generational trauma breaker. It could affect the generation, the particular line. It could affect them. But again, it's going to affect the individual souls and their particular lessons as they come down.
It's pretty hard to not notice that this is a pretty traumatic time in our history. There's a lot going on. As we enter the age of Aquarius, there's a lot of frequency shifts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you see that impacting past life regression and the people that are here? Do you see a lot of people that are coming to break the patterns here and now?
Yep. I see this actually not so much in past lives, but I see it in between life sessions. It's really interesting because before this time, a lot of people, when they come, they talk about their own significant life lessons. They want to learn more about love. They want to learn more about, boundaries. They want to learn more about, it's life lessons. But now we're getting a lot more souls coming down because they're on a mission. And their mission is to help with the shift of the planet. And it's also very interesting because a lot of these souls that are coming down, their vibration is very different. It's almost like they're either vibrating at a high vibration to help raise the vibration of the planet, and they are finding it very difficult to assimilate in the Earth's vibration, if that makes sense, because it's not in resonance. And so when they actually come for between lives and they find out what their mission is, which is their reason for being, then it's interesting how these challenges and all these traumatic thoughts, or these ideations disappear, because now they've got a focus, they've got a reason for being, and then they can help with that shift.
So we've been talking, at least I assume we've been talking about past lives on the planet. These ones that come in with a mission, and some other ones, do they come from someplace else?
They come, we call them non-human resonant souls. So to us, we don't specifically say like exactly where they are coming from. It's just that they're of a different frequency, and they are used to a completely different frequency that is not of the Earth's frequency. And so they come to help with that shift.
And again, I've heard a lot of people say that the Earth is kind of under the gun right now, and a lot of people are watching it, or a lot of beings are watching what's going on the planet right now. Have you
Yep.
seen any evidence of that in between life therapies?
We've seen a lot of evidence, actually, because just I had it's so interesting. I had because I used to train people to actually conduct between lives regression therapy. And we had a student who went back to her between lives. And what she does and her group does is they sort of monitor the vibration of the different planets at different points. And she said that because, during her session, she said that because the Earth's vibration, it's stuttering a little bit. So, she has come down to help with that, to make it a bit more flowy, as it were. And so, yeah, I mean, we're finding it's fascinating, when we get students that come down or clients come down and they talk about their mission. It's fascinating how it is they are here to help with the shift.
How can a person tell if they're one of the ones with the mission?
Well, you can't tell it consciously. You will find out about it. It emerges organically during a session.
But does the person tend to have little markers, like they're driven, or they're
Yes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If there are markers, then there's a knowing. There's also a sense of not belonging, because the vibration is very different. And because of that, they feel a bit isolated and they feel alone. But there is a very strong knowing that they are here for a reason. Now, a lot of people may not they don't consciously understand that. And so the isolation and the not belonging sort of overwhelms them. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I can't say all of them follow one specific path, because they are sort of, everyone's seeded in different paths, like different parts of the world, like what people do. So, for example, not everyone's seated in the spiritual path. You get people who are seated in politics or health. So, yeah, but there is a very strong mission, and also they can see something new. They are breakers of the old systems.
We certainly need some system breakers right now,
Yeah.
don't we?
Yeah.
So, if you're contemplating having past life or between life therapy, how does a person know which one to ask for?
Normally, people who come for a past life therapy, they want to work on a particular challenge. So they either have a unexplainable pain or an unexplainable emotion, or they're going through something quite rough at this time. And that's when they come for past life regression therapy. Someone who comes for between lives therapy, in my experience, they're actually called to it. So they actually get a sense that they need the between lives therapy, and then they contact us. It's almost like their spirit guides are going, I think you need this. And then, and they give them a tap for them to actually come for a between lives session.
Maybe they come to, what was I thinking when I signed up for this? Right?
Exactly. A lot of us do that. Yeah. It's almost like saying, well, I'm going to climb Mount Himalaya right now, the Himalayan mountains, with no training.
Yeah, they just dump you in here, make you forget everything, and you're on your own, right?
Exactly. Oh, so you think, yeah.
Sounds a little rough.
Yeah.
So when we're in human form, our understanding of spirit can be very limited. How can you be sure you're interpreting what's happening between lives accurately?
When we go into the between life sessions, we actually put our clients in a very, very deep hypnotic state. And we use hypnotic techniques to keep them in that state. And it's almost like getting into that brainwave of a child where it's very, very pure. And so people are, when they, in that session, when they are communicating to us, you can tell if it's something that's coming organically. And you can tell when the questioning mind, the rational mind gets involved. And the minute the rational mind gets involved, we immediately drop them back down into that deep hypnotic state. And then the story sort of shifts, not the story shifts, but the way that it's being communicated shifts, that rational mind has gone, has been put aside for a bit. So that's how we can tell.
So the rational mind tries to interpret the information based on our lifetime this time, and
Exactly.
when you're in a deep state, it probably comes through more metaphorically.
Yeah, it comes through from a memory versus the rational mind, the conscious mind. It comes from the subconscious mind. Yeah. And we actually encourage our students to tape all the between live sessions. And so that's when the clients can go back, listen to it, and then sort of think about it and process it. Because the information comes in layers. So sometimes
it's time for us to take another station break. Please stay with us as Reena and I continue to explore near death, past lives, and between lives. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. How can knowing what goes on between lives help us now? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Reena Kumarasingham. Her website, reenakumarasingham.com. Reena, it seems, I don't want to say far-fetched, but quite distant from our ordinary day-to-day reality to consider past lives and between lives and that sort of thing. How can we tell that that's where we need to go? And if we go there, how does it help us now?
So there are two different reasons why people will come for past lives. A lot of people are drawn to doing past life regressions because they want to know the bigger picture of their soul story. They don't want to know the little snapshot of their current life. They want to know the movie. And also they get a sense or that they want to know more about past lives. Or like I said, if they have an unexplainable pain or like for example, a really strange phobia that they can't explain in this particular lifetime. So that's when they can come for a past life regression therapy session. A lot of people can be quite curious and they want to have past life tourism, then they can go for that as well. And that's just, like I said, the airplane view of, different past lives that they can explore. People come for a between life session because they're at a crossroads in their lives and they wish to know what's next for them. Are they going through have they, in terms of their soul plan, are they actually meeting the goals of their soul plan? Are they on track to meet the goals of their soul plan? If people get a sense that there is a mission, then they come to find out, well, they don't actually communicate that, we've got a mission, but they feel a bit lost in their lives and they want to find out like what's next for them. They actually come to us, and that's when normally a mission would come out quite spontaneously and organically during the session for them.
So how do between lives differ from lifetime to lifetime?
So the between life process remains the same. The content is different because people go through lifetimes to learn different lessons. And so the planning to go into the different lifetimes will change. So the reason for being will change. The soul contracts will change. The souls that they choose to have the contracts with will change. Sometimes some people, they shift missions as well. Like, for example, I had a client who came to me for a session because, she was, she'd run a business, a very lucrative business. She sold the business and then she wanted to know what was next. And so when we did her between life session, we found out that her last past life, she was a miner, a coal miner, and she actually died when she was underground. And so when we actually went to the between life state, because that's how we actually go into the between life state, we go to your last past life. That's the takeoff point, and then we go into the between life state. Okay, so that's a bit of technicality. So when we then went into the between life state, we found out that during the planning, one of her soul mission, like her bigger mission, was to basically construct different planets. And so, for a few lives, she actually was looking at land. So, that's why her last past life, she was actually a miner, but she was, sort of collecting information about the earth and the geology of the earth. And so now she's actually changed her mission in this life, and she has to look, she's looking at organisms on the planet. And so her path was to basically look at animals in the current life. And then, obviously she'll go through a few lives looking at animals, and that all that knowledge and information will sort of moves into her mission of constructing planets.
So you said that you go into a past life, okay, to
The
give
last
you
past
access to between lives. So how many past lives back can you go to get access to the between life between those lives, and how important is that?
We say that the most important one to go to is the last past life, because you want to know about your plan for your current life, because this is the life that's most relevant. And therefore, the information from the between lives that's most relevant to that is your the one just before your current life. If people want to explore it some more, they can go back to different past lives to access the different between life state. And I know very few people who do that, and they do that more for knowledge gathering and not so much for shifting their lives or changing their lives or changing their perspective of their lives moving forward.
So if we go and we look at past lives, we're going into the past in a way. Does doing that change our future?
No, because what we are doing when we go and look at the past is we are trying to get information about why we are having the current challenge that we are having. If it is going to change the future, it would be us making the choice to maybe shift that particular challenge. So, for example, if we've had a few lifetimes of being scared of spiders, for whatever reason, and I'm trying to pick a very light phobia, but If we can overcome the fear of spiders in this particular life, then there will be a next lesson or a next mission in your future lives. But if we don't overcome this fear of spiders in the current life, even if we go and explore the past lives, because, it's too much or it's too deep, then there is an option to then bring that fear in the future lives, should we choose to do that.
Well, it sounds like we do change the future then, simply by our choices.
Yes, we do, yeah.
So tell us a little about your research in near-death experience, between life and near-death experiences.
Yeah. So because I had my own near-death experience, and I had my own between lives spiritual regression, and I used to train people to do the between lives, I realized that there were similarities in the stages of my near-death experience and the some of the first few stages of the between lives. So the light beings coming down, that there's that conversation about the life, the about my childhood wounding that happens in the between lives as well. There is also the pulling, how we move from the body to a different space. So the between lives, though, continues on with the meeting of the soul groups and the planning for the next life. Now, had I gone through that, then it would have been a death experience, not a near-death experience. So I basically, and I said to Andy, I said, isn't this interesting how these stages are very similar to the between life stages? And I was curious to know whether it was because I was filtering it through my own brain. And, I was quite well versed in the between life stages. And so, we looked for books, and there were, no research out there about it. And so what Andy and I decided to do, at first it was more for ourselves, was to look at the near-death experience accounts and between life regression accounts to see if these similarities were universal or if it was just for me. So we looked at about 500 case studies of between life accounts, and we looked at about 400-ish case studies of near-death experiences that were collected by near-death experience pioneers, like Dr. Pim Van Lommel and Dr. Bruce Grayson and Dr. Peter Fenwick. And we actually found that there was a very, very strong correlation in these stages, in the between lives regression and the near-death experience. So we found that very interesting.
Yeah. So you speak of the new consciousness. What do you mean by that?
Oh, it's what we were talking about before, about the shift of the planet. It's almost like moving, like you said, we're moving into the age of Aquarius. But if you actually also look at the Vedic astrology says that we are actually now moving from the Kali Yuga, which is the dark ages, and we're actually ascending. As a collective consciousness, we're ascending. Some Vedic astrologers say we're going into the Satya Yuga, which is the golden age. Some say that we're going to the Iron Age. But there is that ascending, and the timeline between us going to the Western astrology of us moving into the age of Aquarius and the Vedic astrology actually correlates. So there is this enormous shift in consciousness. And the way I would explain that is that the earth is just vibrating. It's vibrating so quickly. It's almost like we take a rug and, like a dirty rug on the floor, and we're just agitating it with the vibration. And with that agitation, a lot of dust will come out. We see things under the carpet, maybe like some bugs, some dead bugs, or,
Right.
an old coin.
It's that time. We're just about out of time, and I would be
Oh,
remiss if I didn't ask you, Reena,
yes.
what is your mission?
What's my mission?
What's your mission?
Do you know, after my near-death experience, my mission is to be in peace. To be in peace in whatever situation there is, because I dropped all my worries. remember, and everything that I thought was so important. And I just want to stay in that place of peace and freedom. And I would like to expand my own consciousness while in the body to be in that place of freedom and peace that I actually experienced when I had my near-death experience. Because I feel we don't need to go to the edge of life to experience that, as it were. Does that make sense?
It does. So when I'll bet it's a moving target. I mean, you have to constantly course correct. But when
Yes.
you're in that state, how do you find it affects the people around you?
I find that it affects people differently because it also depends on my vibration and what's affecting my peace. So, I've let a few people go and they, were not that impressed with that. They didn't like that very much. And a lot more people have come to me, and we are in the same resonance, and that we're trying to stay as much as possible in that place of peace and expanded freedom. Even the things that I do, my work, like I'm pursuing a different sort of work now, something that sort of impacts that peace, that,
Well,
yeah.
it is time for us to
Oh,
call the end. So unfortunately, we are out of time. But Reena, thank you so much for coming on the show.
thank you so much for having me, Gwilda. It's been such a pleasure.
Been a real pleasure. Our guest this hour has been Reena Kumarasingham. Reena is a regression therapist and between lives therapist and the author of Shrouded Truth, Magdalene Lineage, and Divine Consciousness. To find out more about Reena, where you can find her books and all she has to offer, visit her website, reenakumarasingham.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time on the X Zone TV channel, xztv.ca, where this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.